Alex had always thought of space as a place for adventure and exploration. The stars, the unknown, the mysteries of the universe, it all called to him. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to discover on this strange new planet. It was supposed to be just another diplomatic mission. Alex, a young human, had been sent to meet with the alien species of the Vera, a race that had been in contact with Earth for years. They were known for their advanced technology and their peaceful nature, but little else was known about their internal struggles. Alex was there to assist in setting up trade agreements, nothing more. But as soon as he landed, he felt something wasn't right. The Vera were a tall species with smooth green skin and glowing blue eyes. Their city was beautiful, filled with towering spires and lush gardens. It was a place that looked like it belonged in a dream. But beneath the peaceful surface, there was an urgent problem that no one had told Alex about. Alex was introduced to the royal family of the Vera, a king, queen, and their daughter, Princess Ilara. The king seemed to be in high spirits, but Alex could tell there was something off. His eyes darted around nervously, and his hand shook when he greeted Alex. The queen, on the other hand, looked sad, as if something was weighing heavily on her heart. It wasn't until later that Alex learned the truth. The Vera, as a species, had a strange and dangerous condition. They could only survive if they were touched by a human every day. It wasn't something they understood fully, but over generations, they had learned that the human touch kept them alive. Without it, their bodies began to weaken, and soon after, they would die. Alex had never heard of anything like it before. It seemed unbelievable, but as he listened to the king's desperate words, he realized that this was no joke. The Vera were dying, and it was up to him to help save them. "Alex," the king said, his voice shaking with worry, "our people are fading. Without human contact, we cannot survive. The bond we share with your kind, it is vital to our very existence." Alex was stunned. He looked at the queen, who nodded solemnly, her face full of sorrow. How did you find this out?" Alex asked, still trying to process what he had just been told. The queen sighed, sitting down in a chair. "It began many years ago, with a human who came to visit. He was kind, and the touch of his hand healed us in ways we couldn't explain. From that day on, we realized it was something we needed. But as the years passed, fewer humans came to us, and we began to grow weak. Now we are on the brink of extinction." Alex could hardly believe it. How could something as simple as touch be so important? But the way the queen spoke, and the desperation in her eyes, told him this was real. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Alex asked. "Why keep this a secret?" "We did," the king replied, his voice growing quiet. "But no one believed us. The other species of the galaxy saw us as strange, as weak. They thought we were just looking for pity. But the truth is, we need you. We need your touch." Alex felt a wave of responsibility crash over him. This wasn't just about making trade deals anymore. The fate of an entire species rested in his hands. "How can I help?" he asked, his voice firm despite the confusion in his mind. The queen looked at him with hope in her eyes. "You must come to us every day, Alex. You must touch our people. Your touch is what keeps us alive." Alex didn't know what to say. He felt honored, of course, that his presence was so important to them. But the weight of it was overwhelming. How could one human help save an entire race? And what did they expect from him? Was he supposed to touch every person, every day? The thought of it all seemed impossible. The king interrupted his thoughts. "Please, Alex, we are running out of time. You are our last hope. If you cannot help us, our species will cease to exist." Alex was silent for a long moment. He had never been in a situation like this before. He had always wanted to make a difference, but now the stakes were higher than he could have imagined. I'll help," he finally said, his voice steady despite the confusion in his heart. "I'll do what I can." The royal family seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. The queen smiled softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "You have no idea what this means to us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Alex nodded, but he wasn't sure if he fully understood. He had agreed to help, yes, but how could he possibly know the full extent of what he had just promised? The idea that a simple touch could save a species was still hard to grasp. Later that night, as Alex lay in his bed, he couldn't stop thinking about what he had learned. The Vera people, a species so advanced and yet so dependent on humans. He thought about the princess, Ilara. She was beautiful, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of pain. He hadn't spoken to her much yet, but he could sense she was as lost as everyone else. The next morning, Alex was ready. He wasn't sure what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure: his life, and the lives of the Vera, would never be the same again. The royal request. The sun was setting on the peaceful Vera city, its golden light casting long shadows across the towering spires. Alex stood at the edge of the palace's garden, still thinking about everything the royal family had told him. He had agreed to help, but what did that really mean? The weight of their plea hung heavy on his shoulders. How could a single person make such a difference? Just as he was lost in thought, a soft voice interrupted him. "Alex." He turned to see Princess Ilara walking toward him, her green skin glowing faintly in the fading sunlight. Her long, silver hair swayed with each step she took, and her eyes held a mixture of hope and something deeper, something he couldn't quite place. "Princess Ilara," Alex said, bowing his head respectfully. "I didn't expect to see you out here." She smiled, but it was a tired smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. "I wanted to speak with you, in private. The king and queen have asked you to help us, but I need you to understand how important this is. The fate of our people depends on you." Alex nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand, but I still don't know what this will mean for me. I'm just one person. How can I possibly help an entire species?" Ilara stepped closer, her voice lowering, as if she were sharing a secret. "It's not just about your touch, Alex. Yes, our people need human contact to survive, but what they really need is hope, and you give them that. You are their hope." Alex felt a pang of guilt. "I'm not doing anything special. I'm just touching them. That's all I can do." Ilara shook her head. "You don't understand. For us, it's not just physical contact. It's the bond we feel with you. It's the trust and the care we see in your eyes when you touch us. That makes all the difference. But it's not only about the Vera people. It's about you too, Alex. You have to choose if you're ready for this responsibility." Alex looked away, his mind racing. He wasn't sure if he was ready for any of this. He had only come to the Vera planet to help with trade talks, not to save an entire species. And yet here he was, caught in a fight for survival. "Why me?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you need a human? Why can't you do this with your own kind?" Ilara's gaze softened, and she walked closer, placing a hand gently on his arm. "I wish we could do it alone, but we can't. We tried. Our species has grown weaker with each generation. We don't understand why human touch is the key, but it is. The bond we share with you is something we can't find with anyone else." Alex didn't know what to say. The idea that he, a simple human, could save an entire race of aliens seemed too much to grasp. But the way Ilara looked at him, the way her eyes held so much trust, made it hard for him to refuse. "I'll help," Alex said finally, his voice strong. "I'll do whatever I can." Ilara's face lit up with relief, but then a shadow crossed her expression. "There's something else you need to know," she said quietly. "The Vera royal family is not united on this. Some of my family members are desperate. They don't see the need for cooperation, and they would rather fight for your attention than work together." Alex frowned. "What do you mean? Aren't you all part of the same family?" Ilara sighed, looking down at the ground. "Not everyone agrees with our way of thinking. My father, the king, is willing to do whatever it takes to save our people. But my uncle, Lord Varnak, sees this as an opportunity to gain power. He believes that by claiming you for himself, he can control the fate of our species. Alex felt a chill run down his spine. You mean, your uncle wants to use me? Yes, Ilara said, her voice heavy with frustration. He sees you as a tool, not a person. He believes that if he has you, he will be able to command the loyalty of the Vera people. He's not the only one who thinks this way, but he's the most dangerous. Alex couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had thought he was helping by offering his touch, but now it seemed like there was a lot more at stake than he realized. The royal family's internal struggles were more complicated than he had first thought. What should I do? Alex asked, feeling more lost than ever. Ilara looked him in the eyes, her expression filled with determination. You need to stay true to yourself, Alex. The Vera need your help, but you must not let anyone use you. You must make your own choices. My family will try to control you, but you have the power to stop them. Alex took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had taken on. He wasn't sure if he was ready for this fight, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let the Vera people fall into chaos. Not on his watch. I'll be careful, Alex said, his voice steady. But I won't let anyone use me. I'll help the Vera, but only if it's on my terms. Ilara smiled, a look of admiration in her eyes. I knew you were different, Alex. I knew you would understand. As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Alex stood with Ilara, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. He had made a promise, and now he had to keep it. The royal family's request was only the beginning. Soon, he would face choices that would change the course of his life and the fate of the Vera people. Bonding with the Vera. The days blurred together for Alex as he adjusted to life on the Vera planet. The palace became a maze of corridors, each filled with whispers and eager eyes. Everywhere he went, the Vera people looked at him with a mixture of hope and desperation. Alex had never known such pressure in his life, but he was determined to help. He had made a promise, and he couldn't turn back now. It wasn't just the royal family that needed him. The entire species depended on him. Every time Alex entered the palace, he was greeted by more and more Vera, each hoping for a moment of his touch, and each time he felt more confused. At first it was just a light touch, a hand on a shoulder, a brief clasp of fingers. The Vera's skin was soft and warm, but there was something else about the contact. It wasn't just physical. It was deeper, something that connected him to them in a way he couldn't explain. They would close their eyes, their faces relaxing, as though they were receiving something he couldn't see. But then something began to change. The more Alex touched them, the more he began to feel their need. He could sense their pain, their fear, their hope. And with each passing day, it became harder to separate his own emotions from theirs. Their touch was like an unspoken language, a silent cry for help. One evening, Ilara led him to a secluded part of the palace garden. The moonlight bathed the space in a soft glow, and the air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers. It was quiet here, away from the constant buzz of the palace. Alex had been looking forward to a peaceful moment, but he could tell that Ilara had something important to say. Alex, I need you to understand, Ilara said, her voice soft but urgent. The Vera need more than just your touch. They need your presence, your kindness. The bond you share with them is deeper than you realize. Alex nodded, still unsure of what that meant. I'm trying to help, but it's hard. I can only do so much. I'm just one person. I don't have the answers they need. Ilara stepped closer, her green eyes searching his face. That's exactly why it's you, Alex. You don't have the answers, and that's okay. The Vera don't need someone who can fix everything. They need someone who can listen, someone who can care. Alex sighed, feeling a deep weight settle in his chest. But what if I fail them? What if my touch isn't enough? "It will be," Ilara said firmly. "You just have to trust it. Trust yourself." They stood there for a long moment, the quiet of the night wrapping around them. The peaceful sounds of the garden were the only thing that filled the air. Alex could feel the tension in Ilara's posture, the way her shoulders were hunched with the burden of her people's survival. It wasn't just the royal family that was counting on him, it was everyone. The next day, Alex was called to meet with a group of Vera who had been struggling the most with the lack of human touch. They were part of a special program that allowed the Vera to experience his presence more frequently, and it was clear that they were eager for any sign of relief. When he entered the room, he was greeted by a sea of eyes, all filled with a quiet longing. The Vera looked up at him with a mixture of hope and fear, as though they were unsure if he could really help. Alex felt his heart race as he approached them, unsure of what to do. One of the Vera, a young woman with silver hair and pale blue skin, stood nervously at the front. She had been one of the most vocal about needing human touch. Her name was Lyra, and Alex could see the fear in her eyes as she approached him. "Alex," she said, her voice shaking, will you touch me? Please." Alex hesitated for a moment. It was hard to explain the strange feeling he had when he touched the Vera. It wasn't like touching a human. There was something almost spiritual about it, as though he could feel their emotions more clearly with each contact. But he couldn't let that stop him. He couldn't let his fear take over. The Vera needed him. He stepped forward and gently placed his hand on Lyra's shoulder. Immediately, he felt a wave of emotion wash over him. It was like a flood of fear, sadness, and desperation, all mixed together. He closed his eyes and let the sensation flow through him, trying to separate his own feelings from theirs. He kept his hand there for a moment, not sure if he was doing it right. But then, slowly, Lyra's tense shoulders began to relax. Her breathing evened out, and she let out a soft sigh, her eyes closing in relief. Alex pulled his hand away, feeling drained. Lyra opened her eyes and smiled at him, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. The other Vera in the room began to step forward, each one eager for the same kind of relief. Alex felt a sense of peace settle over him as he moved from one person to the next, offering them what little comfort he could. With each touch, the Vera seemed to grow calmer, their faces softening as if they were being healed, not just physically, but emotionally as well. As the hours passed, Alex began to understand what Ilara had meant. It wasn't just about his touch, it was about the connection, the way they relied on him to help them survive. His presence gave them strength, and in return, they gave him a feeling of belonging he had never experienced before. By the time he left the room, Alex felt exhausted but fulfilled. The weight of the task was still there, but now he understood just how important his role was. It wasn't just about being a savior. It was about being a lifeline for the Vera, a bridge between their world and his. As he walked back to his quarters, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was becoming a part of something much larger than himself. The Vera were no longer just an alien species to him. They were his people too, and he would do whatever it took to help them survive. Jealousy in the royal court. Alex had always been a soldier, used to the sharp edge of competition and rivalry, but nothing could prepare him for the tension he now felt within the walls of the Vera royal court. The palace, once a place of peace and grandeur, had become a battleground of emotions, each day thicker with unspoken feelings and quiet struggles. It had all started innocently enough. Ilara had explained that Alex's presence was vital for the survival of the Vera species, and that his touch was a gift they could not live without. But the more he touched them, the deeper the need became. It wasn't just physical anymore. There was an emotional connection, a bond that began to stir feelings within the palace that Alex hadn't expected. One morning, as Alex entered the royal garden to meet Ilara, he noticed something different. The usual warmth that had greeted him was replaced by icy stares and cold silence. The air felt thick, as though the entire palace was holding its breath. He walked toward Ilara, who stood by the fountain, her green eyes scanning the horizon. "Good morning, Ilara," Alex said, trying to sound cheerful, but his voice faltered under the heavy atmosphere. Ilara turned to him with a smile, but there was something behind her eyes that Alex couldn't place. She looked away quickly, as if hiding her true feelings. "Good morning, Alex," she said softly. "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk." Before Alex could respond, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw two of the Vera royal cousins approaching, their expressions tense. They were beautiful, their pale blue skin almost glowing under the morning sun. But their eyes were narrowed, their gazes fixed on Alex with an intensity that made his stomach churn. "You," one of them said, her voice like ice. "You think you can just walk in here and take what belongs to us?" Alex blinked in confusion. "What are you talking about?" The second cousin, a tall, imposing woman with silver hair, stepped forward. "The bond you're forming with our people, our cousins, our friends, you think you can just walk in and touch them as if they are yours to comfort." Alex felt a wave of discomfort wash over him. He didn't understand what they meant. He had been doing what was needed to help the Vera. He didn't know it would cause such anger. "I'm not taking anything from anyone," Alex said, his voice low but firm. "I'm only here to help." The first cousin scoffed. "Help," she sneered. "You're not the only one who can offer help, human. You're nothing but an outsider, a tool." The words stung, but Alex stood his ground. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted to do what he could to ease the suffering of the Vera. But it seemed that his presence was becoming more of a threat than a solution. Ilara stepped between Alex and her cousins, her voice sharp. "Enough. You have no idea what you're saying." The cousins exchanged a look, and Alex could see the resentment in their eyes. They clearly didn't understand, or perhaps didn't want to understand, what was at stake. To them, Alex wasn't a person. He was an object that was taking their place in the hearts of the Vera people. "You may have Ilara's favor," the second cousin said, her voice cold, "but you will never belong here. You'll always be an outsider, and we won't allow you to take what is rightfully ours." With that, the cousins turned and walked away, leaving Alex standing in the garden with a deep, uneasy feeling settling in his chest. Ilara sighed, her shoulders slumping as she faced Alex. "I'm sorry about them," she said quietly. "They don't understand." Alex looked at her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "They seem angry." Ilara glanced down, her fingers nervously twisting the hem of her gown. "It's complicated. The Vera are a proud people, and the royal family especially values status. The more attention you give to the people, the more jealous and possessive some become. They think that because you're giving so much of yourself to others, you're taking something from them, something that belongs to their power." Alex frowned, still unsure of the full meaning. "But I'm just helping them. I'm not trying to take anything. I just want to help." "I know," Ilara said softly, "but they don't see it that way. They're afraid, Alex, afraid of losing their control over the Vera people. And they see you as a threat to that control." The realization hit him like a wave. He had become a symbol, something much bigger than himself. It wasn't just his touch they wanted. It was the power that came with it. The Vera needed him, yes, but there were those in the palace who needed him for a different reason, because they wanted to hold on to the power he represented. Alex felt a pang of guilt. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't asked to be placed in the middle of a political struggle. All he wanted was to help. But as the days went on, it became clear that the royal family's jealousy would be a constant obstacle. "I don't know what to do, Ilara," Alex admitted, his voice filled with frustration. "I didn't ask for this. I just want to make a difference." Ilara placed a hand on his arm, her eyes soft with understanding. "I know, Alex, but you're here now, and you can't leave. The Vera need you more than ever." Alex looked at her, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just a helper. He was something far more complicated, and it seemed that no matter how much he wanted to stay out of the royal politics, they had drawn him in. As Alex walked away from the garden, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much more complicated. His bond with the Vera was growing, but so were the tensions within the palace. The road ahead would be difficult, and Alex wasn't sure he was prepared for the battles that lay ahead, not just against the enemies outside, but within the royal court itself. The bargain. The tension in the Vera royal court had reached a boiling point. Alex could feel it every time he walked through the palace halls. Whispers followed him, eyes watched his every move. He had never been one to care about royal politics, but now it was impossible to ignore. The royal cousin's threats still hung in the air, and the fear that the Vera people had of losing him made things more complicated. The more time Alex spent with Ilara and the others, the clearer it became. His place in the Vera world was no longer just about helping. It was about power. That evening, as Alex sat in the grand dining hall, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Ilara had asked him to meet her in private, and though her voice was calm, her eyes had given away her worry. When Alex arrived at the private garden, Ilara was already waiting, her face serious. She looked as beautiful as ever, but there was something heavy in her expression, something that told him this conversation wouldn't be easy. "Alex," she said softly, motioning for him to sit beside her, "we need to talk about what happened earlier today. About my cousins." Alex took a seat, trying to mask the unease that had settled in his stomach. He had already known that the cousins were upset with him, but he hadn't expected things to escalate this quickly. "Ilara, I don't want to make things worse. I'm not here to take anything from anyone. I just want to help your people." "I know," Ilara said, her voice trembling slightly. "But it's not that simple anymore. My cousins, they're not just angry. They're scared. They see what you can do for the Vera, and they fear they'll lose their power." Alex sighed, rubbing his temples. "I didn't ask for any of this. I'm just trying to do what's right. But they're turning this into something it's not." Ilara's gaze dropped to her hands. "They're offering a bargain, Alex. A way to make this stop. A bargain." Alex repeated, confusion swirling in his mind. "What kind of bargain?" "They want you to choose, Alex," Ilara said quietly. "They want you to pick one of them, to form a bond with one of my cousins." Alex felt the air leave his lungs. "You mean a bond like the one I share with you?" Ilara nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes. "Yes, they believe that if you choose one of them, they will have control over you. They'll stop the tension, and you'll be seen as one of their own. The court will accept you, and they will stop trying to tear you apart." Alex was silent, his mind racing. A bargain. A choice between Ilara and her cousins. How could he make a decision like this? He had grown close to Ilara, but did that mean he had to give up the rest of the Vera? Could he choose just one? And more importantly, did he want to? Ilara seemed to sense his hesitation. "I don't want you to feel pressured. You don't have to choose me. But I want you to understand the gravity of the situation. If you don't make a choice, the court will never stop trying to control you, and the Vera will suffer." Alex leaned back, his eyes searching the stars above. The weight of the decision pressed down on him. He had always been taught to never get involved in politics, never let emotions cloud his judgment. But this wasn't just politics. This was about survival, about helping people who needed him. And as much as he cared for Ilara, he couldn't ignore the other Vera. He couldn't let their future be decided by a single choice. "I don't want to make a decision like this, Ilara," Alex said finally, his voice steady but filled with conflict. "I don't want to choose one of you over the others. I'm here for all of you, not just one person." Ilara's face softened, and for a moment, Alex saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. "I know. I wish it were different too. But this is the only way. You have to choose. Either you become part of the royal family, or the court will destroy everything you've tried to build. Alex took a deep breath, trying to clear his thoughts. The weight of the decision felt crushing, but there was something else nagging at him, a feeling that if he didn't act now, he would lose everything. The Vera needed him, and no matter what, he couldn't turn his back on them. Not now. I can't choose one of them, Ilara, Alex said firmly, meeting her gaze. But maybe there's another way. A way to unite everyone. What if I don't choose any of them, but instead help everyone? What if I can show them that we don't need to fight for control, that we can all work together? Ilara looked at him, her eyes wide with surprise. You mean, you want to change everything? Make them see that it's not about power, but about the people. Alex nodded. Yes. I'll fight for the Vera, for all of you. But we need to break the old ways, the old rules. We can't keep fighting over power when we should be working together. Ilara didn't speak for a moment, and then slowly a smile began to form on her lips. You truly are different, Alex. I think you might just be right. Alex didn't know if his plan would work, but one thing was clear. He had to try. The Vera needed him. And now, more than ever, they needed a leader who wasn't afraid to fight for what was right. The royal court would not be easy to change. The politics would be messy, and the road ahead would be difficult. But Alex had already made up his mind. He wouldn't choose sides. He would fight for unity, for peace, and for the future of the Vera people. The bargain had been set. But Alex had a different plan in mind. And now, he would make his move. The betrayal. The days following Alex's bold declaration of unity were filled with tense silence. The royal court watched him closely, and the weight of his decision hung heavily over the palace. Alex could feel the pressure building, but he refused to back down. His plan to unite the Vera people had not been well received, especially by the royal cousins, who were growing more frustrated by the day. One evening, as Alex was walking through the palace garden, he caught sight of Ilara. She looked troubled, her face pale in the moonlight. Ilara, he called, his voice filled with concern as he approached. She turned toward him, her expression quickly shifting from worry to something more guarded. Alex, we need to talk. Alex's heart sank. He knew something was wrong. He had spent the past few days trying to meet with the other royal family members, hoping to convince them that unity was the key. But now something in Ilara's eyes told him that his efforts had been in vain. What's happened? He asked, his voice low. Ilara hesitated, clearly struggling with her words. I never wanted this to happen, Alex. Ilara reached for his arm, her hand trembling. What are you going to do? The court is already against you. They've made their decision. I'm not giving up on them, Alex said, his eyes steely with resolve. I'm going to make them see the truth. I'll prove that I'm not the enemy, that I'm here to help, even if I have to do it alone. Ilara's eyes widened as she looked at him, her fear turning into admiration. Alex, you don't have to do this alone. I know, Alex said. The next few days were a whirlwind of plans and preparations. Alex and Ilara gathered allies from the court who were still loyal to him. They worked quietly, behind the scenes, to gather evidence that would show Alex's true intentions. The royal cousins, sensing the growing movement against them, grew desperate. They tried to shut down any talk of Alex's innocence, using their power to suppress those who spoke out in his favor. But it was too late. The whispers of rebellion were already spreading through the palace like wildfire. Then, one evening, Alex stood before the royal court. The entire hall was filled with nobles, courtiers, and the most influential figures of Vera. They all watched in silence as Alex stepped forward, his eyes meeting the gaze of every person in the room. The royal cousins sat at the high table, their faces hardened with disdain. They had expected Alex to cower, to apologize, to beg for their forgiveness. But he didn't. Instead, he stood tall, his resolve unwavering. I've heard the rumors, Alex began, his voice calm but strong. "I've heard the lies you've spread about me, that I'm here to take control of Vera, to steal power from the throne. But I'm here to tell you that none of it is true." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the courtiers exchanged looks, their doubt beginning to show. Alex continued, "I came to Vera because I believed in you. I believed in the people of Vera, and I believed in the promise of a better future. I never wanted power. I wanted to help." He turned his gaze toward the royal family. "But the truth is, you have used fear and lies to control this court. You've turned my loyalty into something evil, and now you've forced me to stand here and fight for my honor. I will not back down. I will not let the truth be buried under your lies." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then, slowly, a few voices rose in support. The courtiers who had been quietly loyal to Alex stepped forward, speaking out against the royal cousins. They too began to see the truth, that Alex wasn't the enemy, but a man who had fought for their future. The royal cousins tried to hold their ground, but the room was changing. The support for Alex was growing, and they could no longer deny the truth. Ilara stood by Alex's side, her heart racing, but her face calm. She knew that this moment was crucial. If they could win this battle, they could change the future of Vera. Then, in a surprising turn, one of the older courtiers, a respected figure in the court, spoke up. "I have known Alex for a long time. He has never been a threat. His actions have always been driven by kindness, by a desire to see Vera prosper. If the royal family cannot see that, then I stand with him." The room erupted into murmurs, and more voices joined in. The tide had turned. The royal family was losing its grip on the court. The truth was no longer something they could hide. As the court continued to speak in favor of Alex, the royal cousins began to realize that their power was slipping away. They had lost the trust of their people, and with it, their hold over Vera. Alex looked around the room, his heart swelling with hope. This was the moment he had fought for, the moment when the people of Vera finally saw the truth. He had won. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Alex could see the future clearly. A future where the Vera people were united, where lies no longer held power, and where he could finally help them build the world they deserved. Ilara stood beside him, a smile tugging at her lips. She had always believed in him, and now the rest of the court would believe too. Together, they had shown the world the power of truth. And with that, a new hope was born. A hope for a better Vera, a hope for a brighter future.